Wassily Kandinsky. B. Moscow, 1866. D. Neuillysursane, 1944. One of the pioneers of abstract art, Wassily Kandinsky has some claim to being the first completely non-representational painter to achieve complex compositions with only barely recognizable objects. Aided by his father's funds, he organized artists' groups, taught art, and traveled extensively with his lover, the painter Gabriele MUnter. In 1908, they moved to the country, at Murnau in Germany. Kandinsky's style developed towards abstraction from a colorful expressionist manner, and his work is the starting point for the kind of abstraction concerned above all with emotion rather than geometry and order. In 1912, he published On the Spiritual in Art, in which he argues that colors and form can communicate without reference to subject matter. In Russia during the Revolution, he helped reorganize art education in Moscow for the Soviet government before returning to Germany in 1921, when he started work at the Bauhaus, see page 482. Lifeline. 1866 born in Moscow, the son of a wealthy tea merchant. 1886–96 studies and teaches law at Moscow University. 1895 sees Monet's Haystacks and Haystacks exhibition and is deeply impressed. 1896 moves to Munich and studies at the Academy. 1911 founds Der Blaue Reiter with Franz Marc, see page 408. 1915–17 separates from Munter. Marries Nina von Andreevsky in Moscow. 1921 leaves Moscow, disillusioned with Soviet arts. 1944 dies, a French citizen. Yellow, red, blue. In Kandinsky's notion of form and color, each of the primary shapes has its corresponding color: yellow triangle, red square, and blue circle. Here, Kandinsky elaborates on variations on this theme. 1925, oil on canvas, 127 by 200 centimeters, Pompidou Center, Paris, France. Closer look. Grid motif. Kandinsky first introduced the sloping grid into his work with the painting Black Grid, 1922. Here, the grid is less dominating partly because it comprises all the colors that surround it in the picture. Der Blaue Reiter, the Blue Rider. The process of removing narrative and objective content from his work was gradually. Rider and Blue Horse are clearly discernible. This painting gave its name to the association of artists that Kandinsky formed in Munich in 1911. 1909, oil on canvas, 34 by 130 centimeters, Pompidou Center, Paris, France. Abstract art places a new world, which on the surface has nothing to do with reality, next to the real world. Wassily Kandinsky. Winter landscape. Showing the influence of Fauvist color in his early work, Kandinsky includes strong line and contour, the essential elements of his later pure abstract works. 1909, oil on canvas, 76 by 98 centimeters, Hermitage, St. Petersburg, Russia. Sky blue. It is likely that these puzzling floating shapes are Kandinsky's depiction of the microscopic sea creatures that fascinated him on trips to the Normandy coast. 1940, oil on canvas, 100 by 73 centimeters, Pompidou Center, Paris, France. Composition 7. Wassily Kandinsky. 1913, oil on canvas, 200–300 centimeters, Tretyakov Gallery, Moscow, Russia. Closer look. Composition 7. Wassily Kandinsky. Painted between 1910 and 1939, Kandinsky's 10 large-scale compositions were his most complex and ambitious works. A seemingly indecipherable vortex of shapes and colors, Composition 7 reflects Kandinsky's quest to affirm the need for spiritual awakening in art, as in society, and places biblical references at its core. Its apocalyptic themes, the deluge, resurrection, and day of judgment, are not expressed in a narrative but in a rising and plummeting universe in which identifiable objects are almost totally subsumed by some greater force. Composition 7 was completed between the 25th and the 28th of November 1913. It is the largest of all Kandinsky's paintings. Composition. At first glance, Composition 7 seems a product of spontaneous creative energy, but is in fact meticulously constructed. There is a powerful diagonal thrust towards the upper right-hand corner, and a further sense of fracture between the picture's left and right sides. On the left, The jagged lines and array of jostling colored forms suggest an epoch of collapsing structures and turmoil. To the right, the lighter, flatter forms and calmer rhythms symbolize the Garden of Eden. On the far right, the silhouette of a blue rider provides hope of spiritual renewal. A depth in space. There is no conventional perspective in Composition 7, but the strong dynamics provide a sense of depth and space. Initially, the viewer drawn to the center, the eye of the storm, but then the attention is drawn to the sides in all directions. 8. Sketch 1. The work includes biblical themes that are more evident in the studies and drawings in which angels blowing horns are painted in the folkloric style of Lubke, brightly colored religious pictures found in Russian peasant homes. Sketch 3. Many of the oil studies Kandinsky made for Composition 7 can be considered as complete artworks in themselves. With such methodical groundwork, the spontaneous and free handwork of the finished painting is all the more astonishing. Influences. Music. Kandinsky first realized the emotional power of music when he attended a performance of Richard Wagner's opera Lohengrin in the 1890s. Years later, he became a friend of the Austrian composer Arnold Schoenberg, whose 12-tone method of composition was a turning point in 20th-century music. Schoenberg, whose works are associated with early 20th-century expressionist movements, allowed sounds to remain dissonant and unresolved and rejected conventional structures to give a composition meaning. In a similar way, Kandinsky replaced representation with abstraction in his art. Musical score. Arnold Schoenberg's music for 2 songs, Op. 1, for baritone and piano, was composed in 1898. Technique. Preparatory work for the painting took 2 months and involved making sketches, diagrams, and watercolors. Certain drawings have areas labeled discontinuity, abyss, or genesis. Kandinsky's companion Gabriele MUnter took photographs of the work in progress. The photographs showed that Kandinsky initially drew in coarse shapes at the center, and plotted a series of lines and forms radiating out towards the picture's edge. He then applied color over a small central section, moving out along the initial lines. Color qualities. For Kandinsky, colors have their own qualities. A vermilion red with a fiery tone implies a spiritual vibration such as a flame, or, depending on its context and intensity, blood and pain. Dark yellow has a musical quality, and dark rose madder evokes a soprano's voice. The latter. Besides being an attractive pattern, this brightly colored ladder alludes to musical notation and the keys of a piano. It may also have a particularly Russian significance. According to Orthodox belief and imagery, the ladder represents the perilous path that the godly must climb to reach salvation. Pattern. This striated pattern of dune-like forms in ochre and raw sienna suggests a desert landscape. Directional significance. Even the direction of a line possessed an inner significance for Kandinsky. Verticals represented warmth and the positive. Horizontals the cold and negative. This blue shape may represent a biblical horn. Angles. Kandinsky saw the acute angle, less than a right angle, as warm and yellow because it occurs abundantly in nature, as in the branches of trees. He believed the right angle to be a cold man-made contrivance, because it does not occur in nature, and painted it a crimson red.